Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the 1971 science fiction film THX 1138. Have my old DVD copy right here. This film was directed by George Lucas. It was produced by Francis Ford Coppola. It starred Robert Duvall as the title character, THX. We have Maggie McOmi, who plays LUH, the partner of THX, and also Donald Pleasance as SEN, who has an slightly antagonistic role throughout the movie. I should also say this was distributed by Warner Brothers. So, a little bit of background on this movie. George Lucas had made an earlier version of this story when he was a student at USC called Electronic Labyrinth. As a student film, it did very well. I mean, it created a lot of buzz within the film student community, and Lucas was already a prodigy filmmaker at USC, highly regarded among his peers. Of course, this is the famous film brat generation of other people there, like John Milius and other people like that. I mean, there's a book about this, Easy Riders, Raging Bull by Peter Biskind, talks about this era in film history. So Lucas, by this time, was working closely with Francis Ford Coppola, and they had started American Zoetrope, which was a film production company based in San Francisco, which was going to produce experimental movies, movies oriented towards youth culture, just as a gathering of artists, not just filmmakers, but writers and artists of all kinds. Now, Warner Brothers cut a deal with American Zoetrope to make produce some movies for Warner Brothers. You know, at this time in the early 70s, the studios were really struggling with how to reach young audiences. So studios were taking chances. Well, let's see what these young people at American Zoetrope can come up with. And THX 1138 was the first movie that was made. So initially, Lucas wanted to film this in Japan because the film would be heavily influenced by Japanese cinema with its formal style, with the lack of exposition. Lucas admired how Japanese films didn't feel a need to provide exposition to audiences a lot, where like in a Kurosawa film about medieval Japan, you had to watch the movie and figure out the landscape and the culture as you went along. So Lucas wanted this formal style, but also a documentary feel. The idea being THX would be a movie from the future, as if you had found an artifact from the future, and you would get this account of what this society looked like. So instead, the movie was filmed in the Bay Area around San Francisco. They used big like civic centers. They filmed in the BART system, the subway system of the Bay Area, and nuclear power plants and other industrial parts of the city to give the movie its futuristic look. What is the movie about? Well, there's the main character, THX, who, when we begin the film, we see it's a society where it's highly regimented and people do these tedious jobs working on assembly lines, and THX is doing this, but he begins to feel alienated. It's also a society where people are forced to take drugs, sedatives, amphetamines, just any type of drugs to keep people docile and in line. So THX starts to question his reality. He starts to feel things. He starts to develop feelings for LUH. And this is a repressed society where sex is highly outlawed or any display of emotion really. So the two of them form a relationship, and they are eventually removed from each other once the authorities find out because there's constant surveillance in this underground city as well. And then the middle section of the movie gets into we're in this re-education place where THX is with other patients, I guess you could say. They used people who were actually in a rehab clinic for this scene. So this part of the movie is it almost feels like a Beckett play, experimental theater, where we have philosophical debates, a lot of non sequiturs in the dialogue. I know they took a lot of things from Nixon's speeches, who was president at the time, and put them into this part. Very experimental. It's all filmed within this white, like 360-degree white set, so it's visually it's quite stunning. Eventually, THX escapes from this, and the final third of the movie is basically a car chase, which was kind of a harbinger of Lucas's future. A a fast car chase that's futuristic as THX makes his escape from the city. So that's the movie. Almost three short films in one. THX is very much a product of the 1960s, where if you listen to Walter Murch, who worked on the sound design, worked on the script with Lucas on this, talked about this movie being a futuristic vision of where the world was going under that Cold War world of the time, where in the West, in America, you had consumerism was taking over. Like there's a part in the movie where THX goes to buy something after work. It's just kind of a pointless object. He takes it home and throws it out, looks at it for a while, then throws it out. So commentary on just the meaningless act of consuming. There's also commentary on what was happening in the East with repressions in the Soviet Union, but also repression in America of the anti-war movements and the civil rights movement, but also in the East with in China, the Cultural Revolution was happening, the highly enforced conformity that was happening, the surveillance culture I talked about that was happening in the Eastern Bloc. So, and this movie, as I said, was intended as a vision of a synthesis of this Cold War world. It's drawing a lot upon other dystopian stories. 1984 by George Orwell is here, with especially with the repression angle and the surveillance angle. Um, Huxley with Brave New World with the use of drugs and and even reproduction is suggested that it's all done in the lab, like there's no more reproduction through natural means, I guess, for lack of a better term. So it's drawing upon those things. Also, the philosophy, the critical theory of Herbert Marcuse, who wrote One Dimensional Man, which was a philosophical critique of repression in the East and West, and where both cultures were going. Also, the film is satirizing bureaucracy quite a bit as young people, boomers are starting to come of age and becoming, whether they were drafted into the army or college students or working, entering the workforce, just how numb the bureaucracy of everything can make you, and that's definitely in this film as well. So a lot of the ideas, a lot of the themes are very much of the 1960s. The movie also speaks to today on a lot of levels, I think, with the theme of technology and the idea of a future where humans become mainly just tools, just cogs in the system, where technology can do everything for us almost. And what is the point of life at this point? If technology can do everything for you, basically humans are just there as tools to keep the system going and not even allowed to live lives with any freedom at all whatsoever. So So there is that theme of technology, which I think definitely speaks to today. Like there's this one interesting moment in the film where it suggested that there's a religion in this world where they go into a booth and there's like a portrait of a Christ-like type face, and you talk about how you're feeling, your problems, and then the computer just gives you the most banal advice imaginable. So, some hints of AI today, we hear about chatbots becoming therapists and how technology will even fill that role in the future. But in the movie, I think more effective than other science fiction movies, really makes technology feel oppressive. With the soundscape of this movie is alienating, the first two-thirds of the movie are really alienating. A lot of it from the technology and what it's done to humanity at this late stage in the far future. So that's a really compelling theme in this film as well. Now, George Lucas famously would go on to make a few other movies he made. But that theme, whether his next movie, American Graffiti, would be about escape, and then the first Star Wars movie would also be about the theme of freedom and escape and tyranny and all these things. But with THX, it's done in this really experimental way, right? And it is interesting how Lucas was able to take that theme and make it more for a mass audience. And this movie famously did fail at the box office. THX didn't do well. It maybe at one time it was considered a cult movie. Clearly, there was more interest in this movie when Star Wars hit, for any Lucas fanatics who wanted to go back and see where Lucas was at early in his career. But I know there's a good making of film of THX, this movie, and Lucas seems to have really fond memories of making this movie, and everyone involved, really, from the cast to the crew, was recalled this as a very exciting experience, like using, taking a very different approach than what any Hollywood movie would do. And so just like a real flowering of creativity that you kind of get from watching people talk about the making of THX 1138, even though the movie did fail. I should mention as well that George Lucas did go back and touched up this movie a bit. So the version I have is that newly restored version, which has some CGI thrown into it. And Lucas did this with the original Star Wars movie, and whether it helped the movie or not, I don't know. I know the original version, as it was shown in 1971, is really, really hard to see these days. But I just wish Lucas would just make that version available. I know he hates it. I know he considers it inferior, but it would be nice to just be able to watch how the film looked in 1971 and just make all the versions available to people. But you know, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, THX 1138, a really interesting movie. Really, very much early 1970s, as I talked about. Movies had this grim, nihilistic side to them, and alienating side to them as well, which we get with THX. But it is an experience. It's a very visually driven film where it's not necessarily, it is character driven on some ways, but also you can just watch this as a visual experience and enjoy it on that level, and kind of get a feel for what George Lucas was doing early in his career. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I guess that's all I have to say about this film. And I will talk to you later. Bye.